A huge tremor shakes communities on both sides of the Iraqi-Iran border. Officials say the 7.3 magnitude earthquake has already left dozens of people dead or injured as search and rescue teams race to the scene. Speaking live from Saudi Arabia, Lebanon's Prime Minister gives his first TV interview a week after his surprise resignation. Saad Hariri says he's stepping down in a move designed to be a positive shock for his homeland. And Mariano Rajoy urges Catalan voters to stamp out separatism and stick with Madrid. The Spanish Prime Minister makes his first visit to the region since he imposed direct rule there following a declaration of independence from the Barcelona government. Hello, welcome back to the France 24 newsroom. I'm Thomas Waterhouse. Iran's Kermanshah region, close to the Iraqi border, has been struck by a deadly earthquake this Sunday. The US Geological Survey says the tremor was centered around 31 kilometers outside the Iraqi city of Halabja. Multiple casualties and injuries have been reported on both sides of the border, with the provincial deputy governor in Iran saying at least 30 people have died. But state TV there is, however, putting that death toll as high as 61. A little earlier, I spoke to our correspondent Owen Holdaway in Baghdad. He had this update.
At approximately 9 o'clock local time here in the evening, a strong earthquake was felt here in Baghdad. Personally, I felt my walls shake quite heavily for around about 8 or 9 seconds, and then it quickly dissipated after that. I didn't feel any major aftershock. Meanwhile, the social media here in Baghdad and the media itself has been awash with footage of scared residents, particularly in the malls, the hotels and the coffee shops, where a lot of Iraqis like to spend their evenings. Meanwhile, it seems like there's some more extensive damage in the north nearer the epicenter, and particularly in the Soleimani province. A friend of mine travelling around Kirkuk has told me that there's been some minor structural damage there. Meanwhile, particularly in Soleimani, the Ministry of Health is reporting of some extensive injuries there, and particularly structural damage in Iran, in and around the town of Soleimani. Meanwhile, in Iran, the state media is reporting that there's been extensive damage in all 14 provinces, and particular injuries on the border town of Kisharin, which is on the Iranian-Iraqi border, where the area has been cut off from electricity, and it also has buildings made of mud huts, so they're not very well equipped to deal with an earthquake of this magnitude. That being said, in the region, I felt earthquakes here before. I've lived in the region for around about 3 years, so this is not the first time. The area is Iran in particular lies on fault lines, and so they are expected. And in addition, I think it's important to point out that this earthquake itself, although it seems quite powerful, has not caused the same extensive damage as such earthquakes in the past, particularly the one which hit the town of Bam in 2003, which killed over 26,000 people in southern Iran.
Next, in a TV interview that lasted over an hour, Lebanon's Prime Minister has been giving his reasons as to why he's stood down. Saad Hariri took to the airwaves from Saudi Arabia live on Future TV, a station which is affiliated with his own party. He said his decision to step down last Saturday was his own, but that he would be prepared to retract that resignation if the militant group Hezbollah promised to keep out of regional conflicts in the future. He repeated on several occasions the fact that he's quit power to cause a positive shock across his homeland, but he was also eager to dismiss recent reports that he was simply Saudi Arabia's puppet. This is what else he's had to say.
I am free of my movements in Saudi Arabia. I can leave Saudi Arabia whenever I want. I have a family. It is my right to protect my family. I don't want to see my family exposed to what happened to my father, for example. I also want to ensure the security of my family and of my own security. I'm not talking about weeks or months. I'm talking about days. If God is willing, I will be going back to Lebanon within the next few days.
Well, earlier I spoke to Nabi Boulos, our correspondent in Beirut, and I began by asking him if we know concretely when Hariri will return to Lebanon and how complicated his resignation will be once he touches down.
This resignation is at the moment not binding. I mean, the president and even having his own party have said that they won't accept it until he actually comes back to the country. And it should be said also that, the fate of the government as it is now is still unclear. It's interesting that Hariri himself, he gave himself a way out. He insisted that actually he could back down from the resignation if Hezbollah, the Shiite group that he's now suddenly criticizing, if that group would actually stay out of external conflicts or conflicts outside of Lebanon. But the real point is now that he has to come back and he has to actually submit his resignation formally to the president, and then they can see what happens. But it's going to be some time, I think.
Correspondent speaking there from Beirut. We were also able to speak to Lebanon's Minister of Education, Marwan Hamadi. This was his take on Hariri's actions.
I'm a member of the government, and I know that tensions were rising and that a number of the ministers were also asking Hariri to resign before he went to Saudi Arabia. So, and I'm one of those. What I can say is that he has stick to his agreement with President Aoun. He has not renounced it. He has committed himself to return to Beirut within 2 or 3 days, as he said. He will present constitutionally his resignation to the president, but he has an obvious condition, which is a condition of survival of Lebanon. Lebanon cannot be a party to this Arab-Iranian feud that is developing in all areas, and that Hezbollah is fueling in Yemen, in Kuwait, in Syria, and elsewhere. This is the real problem. And if somebody cannot see it, it is a big dilemma. I mean, the problem of Hariri is not asking for anything impossible. He's asking for the neutrality of Lebanon. Our economy is in shambles. It cannot afford American sanctions on one side, Israeli threats on the other side, and Arab boycott on the third side. It cannot. It will collapse. And this country, which is a country of conviviality, opening to the world, and trade and services and banking, is not a country that can be a base for the Iranian Revolution Guards to train Yemeni rebels, or to intervene all the time in Syria, and they've cooperated in the killing of hundreds of thousands of Syrians, and they want us back into normal relations with Bashar al-Assad. Hariri cannot take it. If there is a middle of the way return to the dissociation of Lebanon from these crises, this is possible. He can return and even renounce to his resignation, but I don't think that short of this, he can accept the conditions of the Iranians and Hezbollah. And it's not a Saudi stand, it's also a Lebanese stand.
Moving on to Europe now, and we will never let anyone break the ties that bind us. That's what the Spanish Prime Minister had to say this Sunday on his first visit to Catalonia since his government suspended the region's autonomy. Mariano Rajoy was in Barcelona to drum up support for his Conservative Party ahead of next month's regional elections, a vote that he hopes will recover Catalonia from the, quote, havoc of separatism. With more, here's Ivana Skotola.
In hostile territory, Spanish President Mariano Rajoy was in Catalonia for the first time since he dismissed Catalan leader Carles Puigdemont, suspended the region's autonomy and called for new elections there. The president was in Barcelona to attend a party campaign event for the upcoming December 21st regional elections, where he made a speech defending his recent decisions regarding the region.
We want the December 21st election to have a huge turnout, so that a new political stage can be set in motion, bringing peace, normality and coexistence, respect for the rules of the game and also for financial recuperation.
He also urged businesses not to abandon Catalonia after hundreds of firms have moved their legal headquarters outside of the region in the wake of the independence crisis. The event was also a chance for Rajoy to rally pro-unionists.
I think it was very good. It was the message we Catalans needed to hear, of unity, to recover democratic unity and, above all, coexistence. When families break up and friendships are lost, I think we have to work to get this back.
Rajoy's visit comes a day after hundreds of thousands of Catalans marched the length of one of the main boulevards in Barcelona to demand the release of regional officials who have been jailed by the Spanish government for their role in the region's disputed independence drive.
Well, as Rajoy was championing pro-Spanish politics in Barcelona, hundreds of pro-Catalan independence demonstrators were out in force in Brussels. In the shadow of the EU's main institutions, several hundred protesters were demanding the release of the jailed Catalan officials who are being held on charges of rebellion and sedition for their role in the separatist drive. The sacked Catalan leader, Carles Puigdemont, who's in self-imposed exile in Belgium, was, however, a no-show at the rally. One Spanish MEP at the event, though, said that democracy in his homeland is not just sick, it's practically dead. This is what some other people in the crowd had to say.
I expect we will win again because we always win the elections, and I expect that the Spanish government will respect the results.
Human rights and judiciary guarantees are not assured in Spain at this point.
Well, it's incredible that Europe hasn't speak out against violence that happened, and they didn't speak out against people getting in prison for nothing. And so it's like, for me, that's incredible because I consider myself European. I always believed in the idea of Europe, but I'm not sure anymore.
Moving on, Donald Trump has arrived in Manila for the last stop-off of his 12-day regional tour. The US president has joined a host of leaders of Southeast and East Asian nations for a 2-day summit there. On the eve of those talks, guests were treated to a 4-course Filipino-Asian fusion meal at a gala dinner. But away from the glitz and glamour, there are serious talking points on the agenda, including North Korea's nuclear and missile program and the territorial dispute over the South China Sea. And another important issue that delegates won't be able to skirt around is Burma and the country's ongoing Rohingya crisis, as Diptyka Lohan explains.
A glitzy gala dinner kicked off the 50th edition of the ASEAN Summit here in the Filipino capital of Manila. Donald Trump, Canada's Justin Trudeau and other world leaders joined heads of state from Southeast Asia for a 2-day summit focusing on regional economic and political issues. But Burma's Rohingya crisis is expected to take center stage. More than 600,000 Rohingya people, an ethnic Muslim minority, have fled into neighboring Bangladesh to escape the destruction of their homes and persecution by the Burmese military. The UN says it's a classic example of ethnic cleansing, and Burmese leader Aung San Suu Kyi's silence has drawn international condemnation. Amnesty International is urging ASEAN leaders to do more.
The policy of non-interference has gotten into play, and most ASEAN states are just trying to look the other way, while we are seeing that's happening by the hundreds. Nobody is making a serious move within the ASEAN, and hopefully this forum will be able to put more light in the issue of Rohingya.
Human rights groups are urging the UN Security Council to impose economic sanctions and travel bans on Burmese military officials. Some have even called for Suu Kyi to be stripped of her Nobel Peace Prize. Justin Trudeau met with Suu Kyi for the first time on Friday on the sidelines of another regional summit in Vietnam for what he called, quote, direct talks about the refugee situation. Suu Kyi has expressed her willingness to resolve the crisis.
I'm back in 15 minutes' time with more world news and headlines. Until then, do stay with us here on France 24.